Good evening, and welcome to this very first edition of Arroyo Live here on the Arroyo channel. This show, as the name implies, is live and hopes to entertain a dialogue that will allow not only for information, but also so that the viewers can participate and perhaps give us further insight into the discussions that we will have this evening. My name is Joe Carbonetta, and I am joined by a panel of three very, very wonderful guests. Um, the first is Gail Schaper-Gordon. Sorry, I mispronounced that in the beginning of the show or earlier before we went on the air. So I apologize for that, and I'm trying to get it right this time. So Gail
Perfect.
Schaper-Gordon, Gail represents, and I've been corrected about this too, but the information that I was given early on is that you represent a group of 13 CEOs. So welcome, Gail.
Thank
I
you.
also have Mr. Paul Little. He is the chair of the Pasadena Chamber of Commerce
I'm actually
and
the president and CEO.
Yeah.
president and CEO.
The
Okay.
chair is the elected person. I actually get paid to work there.
All right. that's that's good to
Robin and
know.
Gail know because they've both been on the board.
Okay.
Yeah.
We pay them well.
And
Okay, yeah, but don't ask them if I'm worth what I'm paid. So
okay, I will stay out of that one. And finally, Mr. Robin Salzer, and you are a restaurateur, as I understand it.
Yes, actually, I am a retired restaurateur after 41 years of washing dishes and doing everything that goes with it. But I'm still involved in the food service industry.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you all for joining me this evening and for being part of this very first episode. I was hoping that each of you would take just a moment or two to familiarize both myself and the audience with everything that you have done and how you came to be on our panel this evening. And I guess we'll start at the top again, Gail, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, so putting me on the spot first, huh?
I'm afraid so.
All right. I was hoping that Robin would take the lead and set the example.
Late.
Yeah. So I guess what I do is I work with business owners of mid-sized companies, which means that they probably have anywhere from 25 employees to 500 plus employees. I've been doing that both as an organizational consultant and a business psychologist for about 25 years now. And for the past 13 years, I've been doing part of my work as a chair. They're called a chair for Vistage International, which is an organization that provides a lot of resources as well as a large group of speakers and a format for bringing CEOs together in peer advisory groups. So these groups meet in all-day meetings once a month, and then I'm a coach with those individuals. And I've had two groups in the Los Angeles area and one on Kauai that I've gone to Kauai for the past 3+ years for 1 week a month to have the pleasure of working with businesses over there, which are very, very different from the businesses that are here on the mainland. And it's an environment where business owners work with each other to share best practices, to work through challenges that they might be having. And it's a group where they're full human beings. So even the personal life challenges are part of the context of this intimate, confidential environment where they really support each other to help each other become the best leaders and make really good decisions. How's that for an intro?
That that sounds very, very impressive, and I thank you
Yeah.
very much. I want you to know, you were
Thank you.
concerned about being the first up, but you did
Yeah.
a fantastic job.
Thank you.
So, okay, Mr. Little, I think it's your turn now.
okay, so I get 50 minutes to talk about everything I've ever done in my entire life.
Yeah.
Okay.
How long it'll take. Um,
Yeah.
I'm the president and CEO, which is the lead staff member at the Pasadena Chamber of Commerce and Civic Association. We're a business membership organization with about 1,400 members. And it's everybody from JPL that puts rovers on Mars to the guy who's the sole proprietor at the garage that works on my old car, and everybody in between. Um, And, we have probably right now about 150 restaurants as members. So that's a big segment of our membership, but also probably about 90 nonprofits up and down the board. Most of the large companies in Pasadena are members, and a lot of the real defining institutions in Pasadena, Art Center and Caltech, PCC, um, museums, Huntington and Pacific Asia, USC Pacific Asia Museum, the Huntington Hospital, Keck Medical, Shriners, Kaiser, lots of headquarters companies here like Kaiser, and several others. Parsons used to be until the CEO moved to the East Coast, but they are still a big presence here. Um, and it's an interesting job because day to day it's never the same. I can't anticipate what's going to happen Tuesday when I leave the office on Monday, and especially now with the business world essentially being on fire. Um, and I tell everybody I feel like I'm standing in the middle of the forest fire with a garden hose. But we're pitching for everybody and doing what we can, along with raising money to provide food for first responders, including critical care workers at Huntington Hospital, which is an interesting challenge because we can't deliver food there. But also urgent care and first responders around town. And at the same time supporting our local restaurants, or at least some of them, because we're getting donations and then buying food from the restaurants that are still open, the locally owned restaurants that are still open, and either delivering food or having critical care workers get takeout from them. So we're trying to support both the restaurants and and let the people know who are on the front lines of this whole thing that we appreciate what they're doing. So that's been an interesting challenge. People, interestingly, and if anybody wants to donate, it's PasadenaYouthWorks.org, and there's a pull down menu. Interesting thing about this is Pasadena is a very giving community. People like to spend, take their time, do things for folks. With the safer at home rules, they can't go to donate. They can't go somewhere to help out, as Robin knows. And I went and gave blood at Huntington, which is actually not at the hospital now. It's separate, because that's something you can actually do in person. But people are being very generous in this effort and really want to help. So that's nice. It's Robin's doing the food thing. There's a whole bunch of folks that are donating to and supporting food banks around town. This is a really interesting community, with some, right now especially, some really serious challenges that are going to have to be faced over the next 18 to 24 months, I would expect. So that's it. I was on the city council for 12 years. Robin was mad at me for 11 and a half of those, probably. And actually, it was a really good experience, a very good learning experience. As Mike Hawkins says, he wished I had run the chamber and run a small business before I was on the city council rather than after. But it's been that was a really good experience here in Pasadena as well. And this is a great community. You know, love it to death. I lived here since basically since 1982, with a couple of years off before we bought our house. And I wouldn't live anywhere else. So I don't know if you want anything more. We can talk about issues and challenges later on, I suppose.
I was going to say it's become quite apparent that you are extraordinarily busy, and now I can see why you were concerned that 15 minutes would not be enough time to list all of the things that
Yeah.
you have done.
Yeah. The other
Uh,
nice thing about my job, quite honestly, is yesterday my dog and I walked to the office and then walked back. So I have a 1 mile commute each day. So
Well, that's always a good thing too, especially with gas prices being what
there's
they
the dog
are
again.
in Southern California.
Yeah.
And Robin, I have not forgotten about you, but before we get to you, I did want to mention again to our viewers at home that we are actually live right now, and there will be an opportunity a little later on for questions and answers. If in fact you would like to uh, have a few things to say, we will definitely be making a telephone number available as well as other methods that you can contact us. Now, that having been said, we have one more esteemed member of our panel this evening, Mr. Robin Salzer. How are you doing again?
I'm doing wonderful. And I have to correct Paul Little before I go into my little bio is that I
Uh-oh.
wasn't mad at Paul for 11 and a half years because I named a hamburger in my menu after Paul. So, I mean, that's a very distinguished opportunity when you've really made it in Pasadena when you make it into Robin's menu. And, in this unprecedented time, I'm glad that Paul Little is at the helm of the Chamber of Commerce because this is probably going to be his most challenging year. And, like Paul said, we all have to work together. And I think that we're going to, come out better for this. But I started my restaurant business actually 42 years ago in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I was the youngest franchise owner in the history of the company at 23. Moved out here 4 years later. And when I retired back in August, I was in business for 38 years here. A lot of things have changed in those 38 years. We've probably tripled the number of restaurants in Pasadena. We become the dining destination probably for all of Southern California. And it hasn't been without challenges, but I think that it was a wonderful opportunity to come to Pasadena. And it's my adopted home after Milwaukee. I was a city commissioner on two commissions. I was on the board of the Pasadena Center Operating Company, which runs the Visitors and Convention Center and Visitors Bureau, Travel Bureau. I was a Transportation Advisory Commissioner. And probably what I'm most proud about is my hot meal program. 10 years ago, we put together with my former late partner, we put this endeavor together to Pasadena hot meal program. And now more than ever, it's really needed. We're doing curbside and takeout meals from the Jackie Robinson Community Center because nobody can volunteer. And, Paul's been there and, so many people from the community have been there to help serve on the serving lines, but they can't come in there now because of liability. So, I've always been in the restaurant business. I continue to, be a future landlord to somebody in this business. My closest and dearest friends are restaurateurs, and they're struggling. And I'm glad I have the opportunity to come on this show and talk about their stories if they don't come in. And I truly believe we're all going to have to go through some pain before we get to the pleasure, but we're all going to be better for this. That's the only way you can look at it. So I appreciate the opportunity, Joe.
Well, we are very appreciative that you have taken the time to come and join us this evening. We do, as I have mentioned before, have intentions to open up questions to the audience a little later on in the show. But before we do that, we also have a video that we're going to be going to in just a moment. But before we do that, I have to ask the question I'm sure all of the viewers at home really want to know. And please don't think this is the only thing I took away from everything you said, but I just have to ask, what's in the Paul Little hamburger?
Um, as I recall, it had gorgonzola cheese. It was the Paul Little gorgonzola cheeseburger.
Some good stinky cheese, huh?
Oh,
It was the cheesiest, greasiest thing he had on the menu.
And Paul loved to wash it down with I believe it might have been a large Newcastle ice cold. And I did forget to say that I was a board member of the Pasadena Chamber of Commerce under Paul Little's tutelage, and it was a wonderful experience. But the Paul Little burger was, on our menu for at least 10, 12 years. I mean, it was there. It was probably on that menu longer than anybody else's because Paul came in and bought it. So
It was good.
yeah.
Okay.
So it was. If you made it to Robin's menu, you've made it in Pasadena.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us and for indulging me in that rather silly question. And I'm wondering if each of you has some insight into how COVID-19 is affecting your community. We started out with the introductions with Gail. So now I think we'll go back the other way, if that's all right.
Good.
And we'll start with Robin this time.
And the residential community, unlike anything it's nothing like I've ever experienced before. I talk to my former colleagues and friends every day, and they are suffering. And it's not only restaurants; it's your renters. We've heard a lot about the renters. Let's not forget the landlords. And, you know, not every landlord is a mega landlord. Most of the majority of the landlords in Pasadena are retirees that have maybe one or two duplexes. They use their retirement funds to, to buy their supplemental income into their golden years. They have mortgages. A lot of cases, they pay the rent. I mean, they pay the utilities. They have property taxes. And nobody's talking about, doing away with property taxes. So it's affected everybody. I mean, there isn't a day that goes by that I don't run into somebody, and after 38 years, of owning a business in Pasadena, you get to know, a lot of people. And there isn't a day that goes by that somebody will say, Robin, I've never had to deal with this before. Robin this, Robin that. And it's like, my heart bleeds for them. I retired in August. I think my timing, was fortuitous. I mean, I didn't, foresee this coming. And I had talked about it for several years, and I finally, was ready to do it. But this COVID virus is something unlike any of us ever experienced. And through the trials and tribulations that every one of us is going to go through, we have a choice. You can either be bitter or you can be better. And I think that we're going to be better for this. We're going to learn from this the next time this happens, and there will be another time, whether it's medical, economic, civil unrest, terrorism, whatever the situation is. We'll be better prepared. We'll be better stocked. The next time a crisis comes along, we'll be ready to handle it better. What's the bright part of this? We've gotten to know our neighbors. We've gotten to spend more time with our families. I think whether you're religious or not religious, I think it's brought us closer. We see reality right at our in front of our screens here. People are dying, and it's heartbreaking. We're all blessed to do what we're doing, to be on your show here to talk about this. But there are a lot of people out there who are suffering. There's pain, and there's despair. And I do believe that we will overcome this. I do believe that there is a glimpse of light at the end of the tunnel. But that's what the small business owners that I speak with need. They need to see. They're not expecting a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but they want to see a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. And if this goes on, if we don't restart the economy, if we feel and our leaders feel that we are at a safe point where we can do this with new social distancing, and health practices in store, farther spread out restaurant tables and face masks and all those things that, we should have been doing in the past maybe, and we will be doing in the future. But if this goes on into June, July, that hope is going to turn to despair and anger, because people are going to be losing their businesses and people are going to be losing their jobs. And I think that we can be the most resilient people on the planet, but you got to have that hope. And I'm hoping that our leaders can see through a plan here. I know, people like Paul, with the Chamber of Commerce can work with our city leadership and implore them to find a remedy, because we're not Los Angeles, we're not San Francisco, we're not New York, we're Pasadena.
Well,
We're smart people.
and forgive me for interrupting. You had made mention of the potential for a light at the end of the tunnel, but as you also noted, as these things drag on, that light becomes dimmer. So one of the things I wanted to ask you to sort of add on to what we were already discussing is, do you foresee a light at the end of the tunnel for some of these businesses, especially the smaller ones? How much longer do you think they can hold on?
Well, let's look at Pasadena. We've had 12 deaths reported due to COVID-19 virus, and all 12 deaths were from nursing homes and senior homes. They're not in Paul's neighborhood. They're not in my neighborhood. They're not in Gail's neighborhood. They're not in George's neighborhood. They're not in East Pasadena. They're not in South Lake. They've been isolated to senior homes and nursing homes. And I think if we put stringent, hard, new uh, uh, standards in place for them, and we don't see it spreading out anywhere else, maybe we can reopen our businesses in Pasadena. Maybe, a collaboration of the Chamber of Commerce and local business owners can get together with the city and say, hey, these are the standards we need to work with. What are the standards that you're going to require of us? But we need to reopen our restaurants. We need to reopen our merchandise stores. We need to reopen our body shops. And that's the glimmer of hope. But, we, as we are right now, I know the governor said May 15th. I think the city of Pasadena maybe for April 30th, but I don't know what it is. If it goes past May 15th, the longer it goes, the harder it's going to be. And even if you opened up, May 15th, it's going to take maybe a year just to make up what you lost. You just don't go from 0 to 60, just like that. And the other thing is, people are going to be gun shy about going out in crowds. I mean, I don't see, a Laker or Clipper game starting for maybe another year. They're not going to put 20,000 people into a stadium, June 1st. That's not going to happen. But they may put people in a restaurant 6 feet apart from each other. And I'll tell you, the restaurants are not going to survive just on takeout and curbside delivery only. That's not going to happen. I've been there. I've done it. It's not going to happen. They need hope. They need to open these businesses up.
Well, I do definitely want to ask the other members of the panel this evening also how they feel that COVID is affecting their community directly. But since we're right now focusing on the restaurant aspect of things, the local businesses, um, here's one thing I want to pose as a question for all of you. Robin, you were certainly saying that the need is there on the part of the business owners to get businesses uh, closer to some type of normalcy sooner rather than later, because it is difficult for them to hang on. And as you were just saying, they probably aren't going to survive on takeout alone. But if Pasadena, because of its relatively low rate of infection, were to start opening its doors, would that not likely increase the risk of people from other communities wanting to come in since it's the closest thing to normal? And doesn't that then increase the risk of outside infections? And what do you do to combat that potential?
We won't be opening our doors until the state of California says it's okay to open your doors. And right now that's not before May 15th. I mean, I'm sorry, but CNN is on and they just said basically that they're looking at maybe June to July for most of us. That's a long time. But it's not I mean, we have our own health department, which is great, but it's not our decision to make. It's the governor's decision. And they look at the big picture. Whatever we do see, is going to be sort of a gradual ramp up to something. But that something's not going to be what we saw on February 15th. Business, the way people do business and the way people interact is going to change dramatically. And that's going to have a really significant impact, not just on restaurants, who, when was the last time you were in a restaurant that had tables that were 6 feet apart? You're looking at business being being able to be half to 2/3 of what it was before if you're in a restaurant. But if you're in a store, it's the same thing. A retailer, they're going to keep, when I was in Trader Joe's, they were basically, last week, they were telling everybody, stay 6 feet apart. And if somebody got too close, they were like, separate. You're going to have stores that were used to being jam packed with people, all of a sudden having to have, 6 feet of distance between the customers. Even the Apple store is going to notice that. It's going to have an impact on them. Right now, we concentrate a lot on restaurants because they're kind of the canary in the coal mine. But right now, actually, the people who are really getting hit hard are local retailers because they're absolutely closed. They're not open at all. They're not doing curbside service. They're not doing any of that sort of thing. If they're doing any business at all, it's online. If this drags, we've been March 15th, April 15th, May 15th is 2 months. If this drags to June, you're looking at retailers who are on very slim margins anyway, paying very high rents, having to figure out how do I pay back $20,000-$30,000 a month in rent to my landlord. If it were me, and I'm not, I'm not the hardy entrepreneur that Robin is. If it were me, I'd look at the checkbook and probably bail right away. The good part about small business owners, quite honestly, is they're ferocious. They have an emotional investment in the business that they built. And so they don't go quietly. They claw and fight and bite and scratch to survive. But at some point, you've got to look at your finance and go, I'm not going to put my house up to secure my business. That kind of thing. So people are going to really have to look very closely at, how things evolve. But right now, honestly, I'm more than a little frustrated with the city of Pasadena because they're not stepping up to support those folks the way they need to be. They did a nice little thing by rebating everybody's underground utility tax that they weren't going to use anyway. But the city of Pasadena is going to bleed big time if, even if 10% of the businesses don't reopen. But it could be as many as 30 and 40%. So a little investment now by the city of Pasadena in supporting those folks could go a long way to the financial health of the city in the future. But maybe they'll get there, maybe they won't. The county's come up with money, and now they've got a thing with Goldman Sachs to add, I don't know what it is, $38 billion or something. The feds, love them or hate them, they came up with $2 trillion, $350 billion of it for small businesses to maintain their employees.
But that's not close to enough.
Oh, no, it's not. When you think about 30 million small businesses in Pasadena, you're talking about $100 a business. It's not nearly enough. And they're talking about the next wave of those things, of the PPP, Paycheck Protection Program.
Payroll protection. Yeah.
Payroll protection, whatever it is, program, which is necessary. Other countries actually immediately jumped into supporting the small businesses in their community if the small businesses retain their employees.
Mm-hmm.
They have a different view of the economy, and I don't want to talk about what the stock market really indicates and what it doesn't. But gas prices go down, and so does the stock market. It's good for us who buy gas, not good for the stock market.
Well, I think that also, one of the reasons I keep going back to restaurants is, first of all, in my background, but our Governor Newsom, his background are restaurants. At one time, he owned 5 restaurants, and he owns a winery. And if he can use that affinity to that business as a kind of a litmus test of what the small businessman's going through, he went through it. I mean, now he's in politics and he's going on from there. But you're right, Paul. A lot of these businesses, retail businesses, they don't have a chance at all now. I mean, we're lucky, in the restaurant industry that we can do curbside and takeout. But the retail businesses are shut down 100%. And a lot of them are mom and pops. A lot of them we know because we would patronize them. Yeah. And something has to happen. I think I agree, the city has to step up more than just a little bonus of a utility tax charge. But as a former council member, Paul, what would you like to see the city do? I mean, what can they do within their purview? We have actually the chamber has made suggestions to the city. I think they ought to rebate sales tax going back to January 1. Okay. Yeah.
I have a question. No, please go ahead, Gail.
Yeah, well, I guess I wanted to bring just a slightly different perspective, and I definitely don't want to be a Pollyanna because it has been extremely difficult for every single business that I've been working with. And I don't know if it's just by virtue of the fact that these people are in Vistage, but I haven't. Most of my people are fighting fiercely to keep their people employed. And some of them are in essential businesses, so they're concerned. But I'd like to think that perhaps what this system is about, that the notion of rising tides can raise all boats. We do have some businesses out there that are strong, that have potential, and I'm hoping that the strength of those businesses can help the strength of the others. But clearly, small businesses have been left behind, and I really don't want to deny that at all. But it's also been enormously difficult for successful businesses to the system. While there were a significant number of businesses that received money, and I have, one of my members is a banker, and she actually gave out 600 small business loans in this brief period of time. Of at least 50% of the people that I'm working with filed applications, and they even filed early and still didn't get any money. So getting this additional round of money for the PPP loans is extremely important, because I think the fears that both Paul and Robin are expressing will be realized if this additional money doesn't come around next week. There are people that I think have the potential to keep the engine turning and moving in our economy, but it's really essential that that federal money gets out there and gets out there quickly, because these larger, stronger businesses are hanging on tooth and nail, and they are keeping their people employed. But it's a really, really tough environment. And the people that have been our essential services, they're struggling in their own ways as well. So I think that let's look to the people that are still strong, and hopefully that they can find ways to be creative and supportive of the industries that are going to take a lot longer to come back. I know that fast food delivery certainly isn't going to be the salvation for restaurants, but keeping people fed and moving money, keeping moving money flowing in the economy, not all of it stopping, is absolutely critical.
All right.
Um,
And forgive me for interrupting, Gail, but I wanted to make mention that, of course, we are live, and we do have viewers who are watching at home, and they are joining the conversation through the chat. And so there have been a number of questions that have presented, and I thought I'd throw a couple of these at you and see if you have some insights into this. One of the questions was, what services and guarantees are there for Pasadena citizens who are affected financially and monetarily through this pandemic?
I don't think there's any guarantees for anybody. There's no
yeah.
guarantees for citizens, and there's no guarantees for businesses. I mean, we're relying on our local, our state, and our federal governments to, for relief. And that goes for small businesses, that goes for landlords, that goes for renters, and that goes for mortgage payers. I mean, again, and we've said it almost ad nauseum, this is an unprecedented crisis that we're going through. Never in our lifetimes, and we're not that old, and we're not that young, but we haven't experienced anything like this. We're all in the same bed together, and so we all need help. And there are some businesses that are, like Gail said, are strong and they're doing well, but that's a minority of businesses.
It's not going to last forever, though. Yeah.
It's not going to last forever, and that's when the despair and the anger is going to come in, and people are going to be upset. Paul said something earlier, that the small businessman is fierce, and woman is fierce. They're resilient. They're fighters. We all are. I mean, that's the true spirit of an entrepreneur. But sometimes you can only take so many hits to the head before you go down. And these are jabs and jabs and jabs, and we're afraid of the knockout punch coming. And so to answer that question is, we're all seeking relief. We all need help, and we need it now.
And building.
Well, I think, the other thing, if I can,
Sure, please.
what the federal government's doing is great in the short term. They've added $600 to unemployment checks. They did money for small businesses, did money for all sorts of things. That's great in the short term. But I think the other real big challenge that we really need to think about is, what's the world going to be like 6 months from now? And how is that going to help? How is that going to evolve? Corporations and all that stuff, they're great. But 80% of people are employed in small business. And if 30% of those small businesses aren't around, what happens to those employees? But
Paul, I think it's also an opportunity. people are coming up with the most amazing creative ways of re-engineering their businesses, their business models. I think it's time for us to start not thinking about how we go back to the way we are, but how can we move forward and what way can we actually do things differently? And we're in an awkward place right now because we don't know. But I think if we can tap into the entrepreneurial spirit, I mean, Robin is probably one of the most fascinating entrepreneurs I know. And looking how he's figuring out how to keep delivering food to folks. And I think that if we can stop being afraid and create some opportunities, we're survivalists as well, and we're fighters and survivors. So I don't want to be Pollyanna, but I really believe in our ability to get out of this. I mean, we have a double whammy. I mean, we survived '08, which seemed like the most devastating time that we ever encountered. Now we're handicapped because we have to do everything this way, video, and we can't even, shake each other and make things happen.
Well,
Yeah,
I think, I mean, this is gonna have repercussions throughout. If I were
Everywhere.
a commercial landlord right now, commercial property owner, I'd be worried about how many of those businesses that have people working from home are going to decide that those folks can still work from home, so they only need half as much office space. I mean, because the other reality is coming out of this, is the mindset of consumers is going to be very different than it was 2 months ago. And also the mindset of business people across the board.
Everywhere.
Well,
People have learned, Zoom. I had never used Zoom,
Yeah.
and now I'm like
Continuously.
at one point
Yeah.
here, that stuff. But my board meetings from now on may be more Zoom than in person because it's simpler.
well,
But also, if you can conduct business this way remotely, if you're an insurance company, a CPA, a lawyer, whatever, then you don't need necessarily as much space. You don't need as much infrastructure, and you can use the technology, to do things differently. Which again is businesses adapting to make things work as efficiently as they possibly can, but at the same time has employment repercussions and has repercussions for, as I said, landlords and tenants and property managers and the people whose businesses serve those folks when they're in those offices.
Let me
every
ask you a
every business
question.
owner that I've talked to has said that they're redoing their template, that when things open up, they're not going to be doing business as they've done in the past. Their hours of operation are going to change. Instead of
Yep.
being open 7 days a week, they're going to be open maybe 6 days a week. Instead of being open from 9 in the morning till 10 at night, they're going to be open from 11 in the morning till maybe 8 at night. And I'll tell you, the other thing that hasn't been said through this, and I don't want to open up another can of worms, but I guess I will. In Pasadena, the minimum wage is going to go up to $15 an hour on July 1st, only in Los Angeles, Santa Monica, and Pasadena. And every city that surrounds Pasadena, Arcadia, Monrovia, La Cañada, Sierra Madre, they're all going to be on the state timeline. Now, in extreme financial distress that we're going through right now, the other pressure and stress that's being put on the small business, retail, restaurant, every type of business is the minimum wage going up, the $15 an hour.
Robin, I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry, but we actually have a caller who would
Good.
like to ask a question herself. This is Mary, and she's been holding for us. Mary, how are you this evening?
Hi, Mary.
Mary, can you hear us?
I can. How are you all tonight?
Great.
Mary.
All right. I have a question for Gail. Gail, I know you're a leader in the business community and do a lot of coaching as well. And I wonder what tools you recommend to business owners as leaders of their organizations to help really support the morale of their teams and as a business owner to keep our energy up for them.
Thanks, Mary. That's a really good question. And I think that I was actually on a webinar this afternoon from a person that specializes in what's called catalytic coaching. And he said that this is really the time where, as opposed, working with our employees, one is about being honest, but also being hopeful and optimistic. And that when you have it go throughout, not just the leaders, but have all of your supervisors really take time to listen to and talk to all of the people that they're supervising as human beings. So not just talking to them about the work that they're doing, but ask questions about how have they been impacted? What about their families? How are their families doing? Extended families? What kind of issues are they facing and struggling with? So that you really have an opportunity to experience them as human beings and appreciate the challenges that they are facing themselves. So I think it's an excellent question, because I think that it's really easy to listen to the news, to hear about the worst case scenarios, but ultimately we're gonna find our way out of this. It may take longer than we really want, but I think you're on the right track, Mary.
Okay, well, Mary, thank you so much for your call this evening. Now, I want to ask each of you on the panel a question. Um, there has been a lot of discussion in the media, not only within local cities, but statewide. Although I would like to keep the scope of this question more closely related to our local community. But cities all over the state are suffering a loss of revenue uh, from taxes, sales tax that's not coming in, parking tickets, speeding tickets, uh, all of those normal sources of revenue for local communities, and certainly Pasadena is no different. My question to each of you, and perhaps Paul, with all of the work that you do, you might have an even greater insight into this. But how is this affecting the city of Pasadena, and what does it look like for the city moving forward? Oh, Paul, I'm afraid we can't hear you. I think your microphone is muted.
Not me.
There we
Can you hear
go.
me now? Okay.
Yeah.
And also at 6:15 in the afternoon, they're mowing the lawn next door.
I understand
So
completely.
it's not the dog barking, they're mowing the lawn next door. But anyway, interesting you should ask, because on the agenda on Monday's city council meeting is a report from Matt Hawksworth, the finance director, about income, city income, and how it might be affected by this. And quite frankly, they're looking at income from restaurants, for example, dropping by 60% sales tax in the 3 months that we're looking at this window. And next year, I think he's projecting something like, on average, 5 or 6% loss, which, quite frankly, I think is optimistic. Um, so they're starting to take a look at it. We're going to see what happened in 2008 happen again, which is the city's going to have to tighten their belt and do what everybody else is having to do, which is
Absolutely.
figure out what's your core business, what's your core service, what's the core things that you do, provide those, and jettison everything else.
But is
You
this
know,
likely to result in a loss of some of the services that many of the residents here locally have come to not only depend on, but really expect to see in the local community?
it depends. Quite honestly, it depends. If they do what Gail's been talking about, and what kind of we've been talking about, which is um, adjust the way you provide those services, or the way you provide some of your services differently. If they look at a different path, then maybe not. But if they don't, if they just are business as usual, we're going to keep going on the way we've been going on, and wait for the money to come back, then no, we're going to see losses. This is I mean, Gail's right. This is an opportunity in some senses. On the macro scale and the micro scale, it's a real opportunity to look at how our economy works and where the support is necessary to keep it going. But it's also on a mid macro scale. It's an opportunity for government to look at what they do, how they do it, and what it costs to do it. And on the business by business by business scale, it's a chance for people to look at how they do business, what they do, what they provide, and do it in a way that remains profitable for them. Things will be very different at all levels in this, globally, as well as neighborhood by neighborhood, block by block. if the city of Pasadena is or any city, is willing to take a look at how they do business, and make take advantage of the tools and opportunities there, and look at where they're doing things. What is not the core business? What are they doing that they don't really need to do, or what are they doing that someone else could do better for less money? Then maybe maybe they will do okay if they keep going on the way they've been going on, and expect that the world is going to spin back on its axis. Then probably not.
Well, I'm also curious to know what individual challenges your businesses have faced as a result of this pandemic and all of the measures that have been taken to mitigate it, and what remedies that you have employed to get around these problems.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm a realtor. My wife's a realtor, and we had free escrows fall out because COVID virus, and they fell out with no ramifications. You cannot show a house. You can't take people into a house, and people, you can't do an open house. You can do virtual open houses, but it's not the same. You don't have that contact. But it's very difficult. Let me just go back to what you said about the city and kind of what Paul had said. The city of Pasadena is going to have to trim the fat if they want to keep the public services going and not diminish what is expected by its residents and its offerings. They're going to have to run the city like a business. And I know they run the city like a business because they have a city manager and they have a department of finance and all of that. But they're going to have to look at it like an entrepreneur would look at it. And they're going to have to trim the fat. They're going to have to watch their spending. They're going to have to keep the public utilities and keep the public safety as it is. But they're going to have to trim the fat. I mean, and yes, they're losing revenues. They're losing sales tax. They're losing businesses. Like Paul said, 30 to 40% of the businesses may not reopen. And I'll tell you, the other thing is every restaurant that I've talked to, every small business I've talked to, they're not going to reopen when this shutdown is lifted. The way they do business again is not going to be the way they've done it in the past. And the restaurant that was open 70 hours a week is now going to be open 55 hours a week, which will also affect sales tax, which will also affect, if you do the numbers and you follow that path, there'll be less revenue generated. There'll be less employees working. Everything will be less.
Yeah,
and they say less is more.
The other thing,
less may not be bad.
no, it may not. But
Robin, you've had extra time with your kids. There's so many people now that are, that are working from home, and their employers are finding out that they can work from home, and they're spending more time with their kids. I think that there is some potential upside. We have to probably grieve what we're going to be losing in our lives and let go of that and be able to move on to the opportunities. I have a person that does the audiovisual integration for theme parks all around the world. All of his projects are on hold, obviously, because all of the theme parks are going to be shut down. They're thinking about what other ways that they can use their skills to where the world is probably going to go, the opportunity for virtual reality. Clearly, there's going to be other kind of opportunities, but he's also realized that all of his employees now can work virtually. He was afraid of these, and he's finding them more engaged, having closer relationships, and feeling like they know the people that they work with better because they're sitting as close as you guys and I are sitting today with our screen. Paul, I guess when we've hugged, every now and then we've been this close. But
All
the
right,
fact that we've all been sitting
I'm sorry,
this
I
close.
don't mean to cut you all off,
table
but
now.
I'm sorry, we're
think-
kind of short
but I-
on time, and we do
okay.
have a
Yeah.
caller.
But I think
Okay.
there's one other thing to bring into the discussion, which is consumer confidence.
Paul,
Yeah.
can I stop you for just a moment because we do have a caller, and I'm sorry,
Okay.
we're
No,
really
that's okay.
short on time.
Yeah.
Amanda, are you there? Hello, Amanda.
Oh, no worries.
Well,
Tyrone. Hello, everybody.
perhaps this is Tyrone. I'm not sure now. Apparently, we had a couple of calls.
This is Tyrone.
Tyrone, how are you this evening?
I'm doing good. First of all, I want to thank all of the panelists for being there, and also for all you do for the residents of the city of Pasadena through hiring, as well as supplying us with food since this has started. Me and my wife.
What do you have on your feet right now?
What do I still have? I have literally nothing on.
Can I make
Nothing
one
on
quick
my feet,
interruption
nothing on my
again?
feet.
I wanted to point out that this is our vice mayor, Tyrone.
Yes.
I'm just being given that information right
I have
now.
something on. I have something on. I literally have no shoes on my feet right now, though.
That's
But
okay.
That's just because I was able to just to get to my home. But I do want to give a big thanks to all of our small business owners. But something that me and my wife have been doing. I've been fortunate to be considered an essential business. So my business is still running, not at full cylinders, but I've got my guys and everybody still working. But I do have to say that something that me and my wife have been able to do, and just by blessing, is supporting a small local business every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night. So this evening we ordered from Avante. We also ordered ice cream from Carmela's, which is right on the borderline of Pasadena and Altadena. So, but my question to you is, did our freeze of the tax for the surtax for restaurants and for businesses and residents, some residents told me that they think it's going to be helpful to them, but for you as a business owner, was that a helpful move?
Well, I think that's a start, but I hate to say it this way, but it's like a
Yes.
drop in the bucket in the big
Small.
picture.
No, absolutely.
Drop in the bucket,
Yeah.
but it is a start. But I hope, you with your leadership can convene with, your colleagues and come up with something stronger. The small businesses, you're a small businessman yourself. These small businesses in Pasadena, small to medium sized business, they need hope. And they need something to come from you saying that, hey, there is, as I said earlier, there's a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. So it was a nice start, but we certainly need a heck of a lot more.
And I definitely agree with you on that statement. I think that was, like I said when I chaired the meeting, these are just ideas that all the council members were coming across with, and well, actually that's something that Steve Mermel, we actually talked about that a while back about freezing it, and I actually asked for the funds to be actually refunded back to residents because we can't use all those funds.
Yeah. So Tyrell,
but I do want to know, like, do you have
something
any
else.
suggestions? Like,
Yeah,
what suggestions do you have?
don't do anything that's going to add any kind of a cost in any way, shape, or form to any business anywhere in the city.
yeah,
And we would like to
That's the
thank you
first
for
That makes sense.
yeah.
we would like to thank you for always looking for local opportunities and for doing so much for the
Yeah.
local businesses.
So Tyrone, so how much more difficult it is to do your essential job with all of the conditions that we have around?
Oh, it is way more difficult for us to do flooring projects. I'm a floor covering contractor by trade.
Uh-huh.
The 6 feet apart separation, everybody wearing masks, the times that we can work. The regulations are tough, but luckily, like some small businesses that I've ordered from today, they're still open, and we're figuring out new ways of continuing operation. One other thing that's been kind of complicated is now that all of the buildings that I typically do work in are all shut down, I'm pretty much overwhelmed with a lot of work because they're like, well, you have a PO for this and this, and all of my dates that we had scheduled have all been pushed up now because a lot of the businesses that I would typically do work for are now shut down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's even though you're essential and you're staying open, it's extremely challenging, all the cleaning and all the extra steps that you have to take just to get the job done now. So there's going to be, the force majeure pieces for contractors is going to be very interesting, and how that's going to come out to play. The additional costs of doing work. And I'm thinking of all of the architects and contractors that are in the middle of projects when maybe the whole design of buildings may have to change. There's ways in and ways out now so that people don't run into each other. And how are you going to have separation in rooms. I think we're going to be finding there's probably going to be a whole lot of new kinds of careers and opportunities are going to be created just in terms of dealing with the new world that we're going to be in going forward.
Well, I'm afraid
No,
that we're close to running out of time here, and I did want to
Oh,
say
okay,
thank
well
you.
then I thank everybody once again. I'm very grateful. I will be patronizing all of your businesses hopefully soon.
Well,
All
for
right.
me,
Thank you.
that's 1,400 businesses. You're going to be.
Yeah.
Harold, thank you
I'm
again.
going
I
broke, Paul.
actually, no, I know. I actually, me too. I'm doing takeout a couple times a week for dinner and a couple times a week for lunch, just because I got to support my folks. And I do look forward though to actually seeing you in person. So
I absolutely look forward to seeing all of y'all in person, and we will definitely get through this, and we'll get through this soon, and we're going to come out stronger.
We absolutely will.
Thank you for joining us this evening on the program.
Absolutely. Take care. Bye.
Night.
Thank you.
Well, I'm afraid we're really down to about a minute left. I'm wondering if anybody has any very, very quick closing thoughts.
the only thing I would be interested to see is consumer confidence when we get through all this. Is somebody who's been collecting unemployment for a few months and potentially lost their job because of an illness that came upon us in a 6-week time frame, going to actually want to go out and spend 30 grand on a car, for example, those kind of things. So it's going to be sort of an interesting to observe over time whether this has an impact on people's spending, buying habits, not just the workplace, but how people look at spending money and what they do with their money.
All right. I'm afraid I have to wrap it up now, but thank you all very much. I want to say thank you to Gail Schaper-Gordon. I want to say thank you to Robin Salzer, and thank you to Paul Little for joining us, and thank you at home for joining us this evening on Arroyo Live.